All right, well, welcome to part 2 of this Complete Beginner Whittling Lesson, part 2 of our series on the Simple Cactus. And in this video, we are going to take what we did in part 1 and move it to this stage where we're going to round off the top and the bottom. But what you'll notice about it is we're not going to completely round. We're going to intentionally leave some interesting facets in a pattern there, and I'm intentionally leaving all of these flat surfaces this time as we go around. So not as smooth as we did on the little people, but that's intentional, and that's what we're going to do in part 2, working towards this as our end product for the Simple Cactus. So our learning goals for this lesson are that you will be able to follow a pattern method to shape your wood, and I'll talk a little bit about that. What I mean is we're going to follow a pattern repeatedly in order to shape our wood. That's going to help us keep it on track. And then the second goal really is that you're going to carve clean and flat facets onto your project. We did that a little bit in part 1, but we're going to stress that here in part 2 as well, and how you can make those clean facets that I think will really make your carvings stand out. So let's get started here. Here's the piece that we started in part 1. Actually, I think this is the piece we started in part 1. I've got a couple in progress pieces here. And what we're going to do as our next step is we're going to shape the top and shape the bottom of this where it comes into the base. So in order to do that first, what I'm going to do is measure, and I want to start about 1/2 inch up from the base. So I'm going to mark right on one of these flat surfaces at the 1/2 inch mark. Let me go around 4 sides and do that at a 1/2 inch up. Now remember, this is a 3-inch tall project. The base is 1 inch. The cactus will be 2 inches. And so within the cactus, the bottom 1/2 inch will be tapered down to the bottom, and the top 1/2 inch will be tapered up to the top. So I've got those just as references, and I can kind of eyeball now across between those lines. And this doesn't have to be completely perfect. We're just trying to get a rough estimate of where we're going to start carving down from, about a 1/2 inch up from the bottom. And while we've got our pencil out, we'll go ahead and do it from the top as well. So let's start a 1/2 inch down from the top. Just going to be about there. And in this case, I can reach it, so I'm just going to use the knuckle method to continue that line across all 8 sides of that piece. All right. Now, one of the learning goals we talked about for this lesson is that we're going to follow a pattern to shape the project. And so what that means is that not just a pattern like I'm going to draw a pattern on, but I'm going to follow a similar pattern all the way around to create the facets that I want on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw, if we look at this corner, this hard corner right here, I'm going to draw a triangle on that looks like that. You see that? And I'm just going to go ahead and continue that all the way around like that. And like that. And there. I'm going to use these triangles as references for what I'm going to remove in order to start tapering the cactus down into the base. And I'll mark those again just to make it clear which ones we're removing. So what we're going to do essentially is just remove that triangle to start with. So I'm going to extend my stop cut now. I've already got a stop cut up to here, but I'm going to extend my stop cut, and I'm going to push cut into it. I'm going to do that across the side until I've created a flat surface across that triangle. And again, you might take a few cuts to do that. You might do a couple on each side and then come back at the end with your whole knife to do that. And do that again over here. Like this. And do it over here. You might start little and do this several times if that's more comfortable for you. But by the end, you want to be able to take your entire knife, put it down there, and make a nice flat surface, or facet, I should say. Facets are the flat surfaces that you carve onto your whittle onto your carvings. All right, so I've got that all four sides around. Now the next thing I'm going to do is, I'm not going to draw it on, but I'm going to come to each one of these corners where I didn't carve in, and I'm going to carve in from these corners next. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to do a push cut into the bottom and a stop cut down there. Okay, and you might take a couple there to kind of bring them further in. I can do that pretty much in one cut, but if you're a beginner, you may want to start with a cut like that and then extend back to the line. And you might even take 2 or 3 cuts to do that. But what that's going to do is it's going to make sure that I'm carving in regular intervals around the outside, and then I'm making flat surfaces. So you see that pattern. I like that pattern. You could do something that's a little bit more organic, and that's fine. But this is great practice, I think, to just make those clean, flat surfaces. So the next thing I'm going to do is, you can see this natural shape here in between the facets. I've got this triangle coming down from the flat. That's part of the flat surface here. And what I'm going to do is that now I'm going to start at that point, and I'm going to carve straight into the bottom like that. And now I've got a really cool pattern coming together here, where I've got that triangle and that one going in, and these on either side. So then I'm going to skip over to this one. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to do a push cut into the bottom and a stop cut to get it out. Push cut in, stop cut. At this point, I could do the stop cut first and then the push cut, but our base is so deep there now that it's usually easier to do the stop cut portion of it second, but that's fine. All right. So now I've got a really interesting geometric pattern going here with those triangles coming in, right? And so the last thing I'm going to do, just to make this round off a little bit further, is I'm going to come in just between those surfaces, about halfway between the last one and the bottom, and I'm just going to do one more push cut in around like every other surface there. And that's just going to add a little bit more rounding to the bottom of the plant. That'll make it stand out from the base a little bit further. Okay. And these are pretty close. You should be able to do them in one cut in order to get there. And I think I've been all the way around now, so I'm going to stop there. Now, quick note, if you're cleaning up your base here, you see some of these uneven lines, you should be able to, it might take a little bit of practice, but you should be able to take your knife and just go straight along that edge there if it's sharp, straight along, and clean that up. So you can see that's a nice smooth surface now. So while I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and clean those up real quick. I'm going a little bit too deep on that one, but it'll be okay. Okay. If you feel like your knife is struggling or you're struggling, don't force it. It's not worth it. But I can shave those off and get a nice flat surface on there if I need to. And that'll just look a little bit nicer in our in our finished product. Okay, good. So the base of that is done. You can see how that corresponds to the base of my finished piece. And I just think it just looks cool. And that's what I mean when I mean follow a pattern to shape the outside. Now, nature's not symmetric, and I get that, and that's okay. But it's a good, fun choice, I think. So the next thing we're going to do is do a very similar thing up here, and I'm going to just start at one of these corners, and I'm going to draw triangles up very similar to like what we did on the bottom. When I get it up there, I can actually connect these across like that, and now I'm going to remove this entire triangle. And I just think that's easy if you're a beginner to really, really have clarity in what am I carving off to create the shape that I'm going to make. So there's the next one I'm going to carve off. That one was a little sloppy, but that's okay. There's another triangle. Connect those points across the top. And there's another triangle. I'll connect those across the top. So what happens is across the top, I've got another square. Isn't that cool? Geometry is cool. If you couldn't tell, I taught geometry earlier in my life. All right, so I'm just going to remove these corners. This is a really shallow triangle to remove, not as big as what we did on the base on the bottom, but I'm just going to make some flat cuts like that, similar to what we've been doing to remove those corners. And again, you can do that in one cut. You can do it in several cuts, as many as you need. Just create a flat surface where that triangle was until you've got that square left on top. Okay, cut this one in just a little further. You can use that pattern on the top as an example. Right. Cool. Now, similar to the bottom, I'm going to do that one more time on each of the hard corners I have there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mark the center. Let me get that back there. The center of each one of those squares. So I'm going to get a new square across the top, and that's what I'm going to carve down to this time. So I'm going to start from that same point down here. I'm not going to draw the triangles on this time, but I'm just going to make some flat cuts from there up to that line. Do the same thing on this one. From here up to there. And this one. And the same one here, and again, take as many cuts as you need to make that. The goal that I get up to that flat point. Cool. So now I've got another square there. And guess what we're going to do? We are going to mark the halfway point on each of those sides and draw yet another square, or diamond, as though I'm holding it here, like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now in order to get up to these is I'm going to start from the bottom to the top. I'm going to start about a third of the way up, which is about where these two corners intersect. And again, I'm just going to shave off the top until I get up to that flat edge. Same thing on this side. I'm going to shave up toward the top until I get to that flat edge of that side of the square. And I'm going to do that on all four sides. Okay, so you can see our shape starting to come together there. Interesting, clean facets all the way around. This one's a little bit not quite deep enough, so I'm just going to tighten that up a bit. Okay. All right. If you haven't guessed what we're doing next, you haven't been paying attention, I'm going to draw another square like that. Okay, to get to that line, I'm going to start about 1/3 of the way this time between my previous cuts and that one. You could do 1/3 of the way down, 1/3 of the way up, or halfway up. I'm doing 1/3 of the way up this time. It's just going to taper, make my taper towards the top a little bit more shallow than if I did a halfway in between. Okay, and then I'm there. Now I've got this little tiny one. I'm not going to bother to draw the extra square there, but what I'm going to do now is just on these corners is I'm going to carve straight into the corner of the square, and I think I'm at the point where if I do that 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm very close to having that completely shaved off. Now again, when you're carving here, now you're going pretty much across the grain. It's going to be a much harder cut. Try to use a little bit further towards the base end of your knife, further down on here where it's going to be strong and supported. Take your time, push gently, and I think with a few final cuts here on each corner, I can finish this top off until you get that little unshaved piece completely removed. Okay, good. All right, so now I've got this great kind of rounded dome shape, but it's not a perfect dome. I've got these awesome facets and that cool pattern going with it. The pencil lines we can use a little bit in the next step, and so don't worry if you didn't get all of those off. We'll deal with them in the next video. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next part to finish up the cactus. Happy whittling.